ब्रह्मैवाहमिदं जगच्च सकलम् ब्रह्मैवाहम् इदं जगच्च सकलम् चिन्मात्र विस्तारितम् सर्वं चैतद् अविद्यया त्रिगुणया शेषम् सर्वं चैतद् अविद्यया त्रिगुणया शेषं मया कल्पितम् अविद्यया त्रिगुणया शेषं मया कल्पितम् इत्थं यस्य दृढा मतिः सुखतरे नित्ये परे निर्मले इत्थं यस्य दृढा मतिः सुखतरे नित्ये परे निर्मले चाण्डालोऽस्तु स तु द्विजोऽस्तु गुरुरित्येष मनीषा मम गुरुरित्येषा मनीषा मम मनीषा मम मनीषा मम This is a shlokam by Sri Adi Shankara Bhagavatpada that appears in his Manisha Panchakam. Adi Shankaracharya is the torchbearer of Advaita Vedanta, as many of you might know. In the most rudimentary terms, Advaita is the doctrine of non-duality, Advaita, which preaches that though we may perceive the universe to be made out of many different things, in reality, all of existence is nothing but a manifestation of the one single Supreme Spirit or the Parabrahman. If we happen to see anything other than this fundamental truth around us, it is because of the play of Maya or illusion. This is the cornerstone belief of Advaita. Mahan Shri Muthuswami Dikshitar was a staunch Advaitin whose works are heavily influenced by Adi Shankaracharya's teachings. Today, we'll be looking into Dikshitar's composition, where he views Thyaagesa as the total embodiment of Advaita. And I want to make it very clear at the very outset that I individually have no expertise at all to speak on such a profound concept. So, to even approach this masterpiece by Dikshitar, we're simply going to look into some of the works of Dikshitar's inspiration, which is Adi Shankaracharya, who has authored many texts on this topic of Advaita. I pray to both of these Mahans that Adi Shankaracharya's Manisha Panchakam and his Advaita Pancharatnam will yield us a glimpse into the deep message explained by Sri Muthuswami Dikshitar in his Kriti in Darbar, which begins like this. Thyaagaraja न जाने त्यागराजादन्यं न जाने गुरुगुहादि समस्त देवता स्वरूपिण श्री त्यागराजादन्यं न जाने We already start to get the first glimpses of the Advaitic contents of this Kriti in these very opening lines. Dikshitar says, Thyagarajad anyam na jane. I know nothing other than Thyagaraja. And he says, Guru Guhadi Samasta Devata Swarupina. He says Thyaagesa is the sum total form of Guru Guha and all other Devatas. He doesn't see the Devatas as separate deities. Instead, he says Thyaagesa singularly represents all of them. So we already have that first glimpse of Advaita here. Coming to the verse that I began today's episode with, it was from Adi Shankaracharya's Manisha Panchakam, which means his 5 verses of conviction. It is believed that when Acharya was in Kashi, Lord Shiva himself came in disguise to illuminate the core of Advaita Vedanta to Shankaracharya. Lord Shiva says that just like how there is no difference between the sun reflected in the Ganga and that reflected in a dirty puddle, the Parabrahmam pervades all different bodies without any discrimination. Adi Shankaracharya agrees to this, and in the shlokam that I sang, he elaborates further by saying, Avidyaya Trigunaya Shesham Maya Kalpitam, which means all differences that we perceive are due to our ignorance, which creates an illusion or Maya. This illusion manifests as 3 gunas or qualities called Sattva Guna, Rajoguna and Tamoguna, and the Parabrahmam is beyond these 3 illusionary qualities. Now, Dikshitar takes this exact idea and makes it the very first description of Thyaagesa in the Charanam of this Kriti. Let's hear what he says first. Sattva rajas tamo gunatita satya jnanananda rupino sattva rajas tamo gunatita satya jnanananda rupino. He, in the first line of this charanam, which I just sang, he incorporates 2 phrases. The first phrase is Sattva Rajas Tamoguna Atita, which means Thyaagesa is the one who transcends these 3 said gunas. And the second phrase, Satya Jnananandamaya Rupa, is a direct import from the 3rd shloka of the Advaita Pancharatnam by Adi Shankaracharya. So we see how much he has drawn from Acharya's Advaita philosophy. So Dikshitar takes that message and uses it as a description for Trivarur Thyaagesa, saying that he is the true embodiment of Jnananandam or enlightened bliss. After this, Dikshitar proceeds to say Dvitvadi Bheda Kartana, which means the one who eliminates the differences, which includes seeing the world in duality or not seeing it all as one and the same as preached by Advaita. This is something unanimously believed, especially when it comes to discussing Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva's true Swarupa transcends the illusionary differentiations that we see. Adi Shankara says, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha, which means Brahman is the only truth, the world is an illusion, the Jiva and that Brahman are no different from each other. So there is no meaning behind making such distinctions. And it's not just these staunch Advaitins who say this. Even the saint composer Sadguru Thyagaraja Swami, an esteemed member of the Carnatic Trinity, alongside Sri Muthuswami Dikshitar and Sri Shama Shastri, has contemplated Dvaita and Advaita, or duality and non-duality, extensively in kritis like Dvaitamu Sukhama, Advaitamu Sukhama. But when it comes to Lord Shiva, even he agrees with the other 2 on this matter. Thyagaraja, the composer Thyagaraja Swami, who is usually engrossed in singing the glories of his beloved Ramachandra Murthy, happens to sing about Lord Shiva when he visits Kovur, and here he asserts that this Shiva is Bhedavada Rahita, the one who is beyond arguments of distinctions and dualities. He says this in a kriti in Kalyani named Nami Vachina, and Dikshitar takes that exact same message and says it about Lord Thyaagesa and Trivarur. In the kriti that we're discussing, he uses the words Dvitvadi Bheda Kartana, he who rids us of distinctions like duality, and Paramadvaita Swatmananda Rupino, he who embodies the bliss of supreme oneness. This bliss is found by identifying oneself with the Atma which is nothing but Shiva himself. This is what Dikshitar says. And exactly we see the mirror again in the Advaita Pancharatnam. Adi Shankaracharya ends each shlokam in the Advaita Pancharatnam by saying Shivaha Aham or Shivoham, which means I am Shiva, the supreme and eternal bliss. After this, Dikshitar makes a very interesting statement saying Tattvam Swatirikta Asahana, which means that which does not allow anything apart from it to truly exist. Again, rather than explaining this myself, I think we should see the mirror image in the final shloka of the Advaita Pancharatnam. Without going into the shlokam, I'll just roughly translate what Acharya says here. He says, nothing besides me exists in this world. If anything seems to violate this, that is simply a false impression created by Maya or illusion. This is what Adi Shankaracharya says in the final shlokam as the culmination of the Advaita Pancharatnam, and exactly mirrored in this kriti that we're discussing. And this is the ultimate state of identifying with the Supreme, to say that I am the same as the Brahman, and the Brahman is in everything. So by extension, I am everything and nothing besides me can truly exist. Mind you, this is not a statement of ego to say that I am God, or rather it's much the opposite, because in the very first shloka of the Advaita Pancharatnam, Adi Shankaracharya renounces this ego. In fact, he renounces everything from his body, his senses, his family, his wealth, and even his mind. And in my personal understanding, this renunciation or Thyaga is what finally enables him to realize that latent Brahman within him, and to help us all through this journey of self-realization through Thyaga. Shiva manifests as Thyaga Raja or King of Renunciation, so that each of us can detach from the illusory sheaths that hinder us, and finally we can enjoy the bliss of oneness with the divine. So throughout today's episode, we've glanced into how Dikshitar viewed Thyaagesa as a manifestation of Advaita, and we've done so with the help of Adi Shankaracharya's works on this principle. I'd like to conclude today's episode with a very concise condensation of Thyagesa's association with Advaita given by Dikshitar. After all this long, winding talk of philosophical oneness, if there is one take-home message, this would be it. Dikshitar gives us a very systematic breakdown of the principal motto of Advaita, which is Tattvam Asi. It is a Mahavakya in the principle of Advaita, which translates to you are that. It seems like a very vague phrase at first, but generally speaking, among the three words you are that, the word you indicates each individual or Jivatma, and the word that indicates the Parabrahma. Advaita establishes that these things are one and the same, as we saw before. So the motto you are that is the central theme of Advaita. And further, Dikshitar chooses to explain this further to show how Thyaagesa is relevant to this philosophy. We'll hear his own words in this kriti. Tritva paricheda rahitya tripada paramadvaita rupino tattvam padartha sodana seshita tatpadalakshyartha swarupino. These lines come towards the ending of the charanam, and there's a very systematic breakdown of that phrase Tattvamasi. He says, take the three words, you are that. Among those, the word are is just a grammatical addition. So without that, we are left with the two core words, you and that. Now if we decide to dissect the meaning of this even further, we get you and that as two separate parts. And since the kriti focuses on Thyaagesa, Dikshitar doesn't go into the details of the individual Jivatma denoted by the word you. Instead, he picks up that final remaining bit, which is the word that, and says this points to none other than Thyaagesa of Tirvarur. Hence the line Tat Pada Lakshyartha Swarupino, he who embodies the intended object of the remaining final word Tat in Tattvamasi. In Sanatana Dharma, we have a concept called Upeya and Upaya. Upeya means goal or that which is to be attained, and upaya means the path or the means by which it is to be attained. So upaya is that which leads to upeya, generally. From that perspective, it seems to me like when it comes to Advaita, the goal is Thyaagesa, because we just saw how Dikshitar says Thyaagesa is the word, is the object shown by the word Tat in Tattvamasi. So he is the goal. And also by being Thyaga Raja, he shows us the path of renunciation that Adi Shankaracharya has so beautifully demonstrated to us. So he is also the path by which to attain that goal. So ultimately, I believe that Thyaagesa is both the Upeya and the Upaya when it comes to Advaita. And this is the intricate link between Advaita and Tirvarur Thyaagesa. With that, I'd like to wrap up today's Advaitic discussion on Thyaagesa of Tirvarur. In the coming week, we'll look into a very different phase of Thyaagesa as we examine his intimate link with the arts. This deity has been abundantly seen as the subject of many musical compositions and dance pieces. So we'll look into that facet of this Ajapa Natana Thyaagesa in the coming week. So do join me again next Monday for that exploration. Srimad Tyagarajo Virajite, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.